It is right at the top of the hour. So in order to be respectful to your time, I will go ahead and get us started. You may find us repeating ourselves just a little bit as additional people kind of join us over the next few minutes, but let me welcome you again. My name is Avra Robinson, and I'm an instructor with an organization called EdTechTeacher, and we are always thrilled to be able to partner with Digital Promise and the Verizon Innovative Learning Schools program to be able to provide learning opportunities for you. So today, we are in our fourth session of a series called The Summer of Powerful Learning. And this session is called Designing Learning to Connect. So we're really excited that you're here. Let me just go ahead and tell you just a little bit about myself. I am a former classroom teacher and a former technology integration specialist and coach. I live in Northern Illinois, and I'm joined today by Sherry Lofton, who is actually an instructional technology trainer with VILS. Sherry, do you want to say hi?
Hi, everyone from St. Louis, Missouri. Very happy that you're all here. Yes, I am the instructional technology trainer with VILS for the Central Region, and we look forward to supporting you today. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, we're so thrilled to see you. We were just having a conversation about how, we are right in the middle of summer now. I know some schools have just gotten out in the last week or two, but with the 4th of July just around the corner, we weren't sure how many people would be joining us today because a lot of times I think people are on vacation and finally getting a chance to relax after the crazy year. So, kudos to you for being here today and taking time out of your summer to join us. And for those of you that are going to watch the recording, we're happy that you're here too. So just some norms. If you've been to a VILS session, you've seen these before, but these are just our way of trying to connect with you and make sure that we're all, working toward the same goals when we're in this virtual space. So do feel free to unmute your mic if you want to speak as the opportunities arise for us to share ideas together. But also, we're definitely going to encourage you to use the chat today and, ask questions or make comments. We want you to be as interactive and engaged as possible. We do ask that you be mindful and be kind to yourself and others. So try to just, set aside whatever else you've got going on for the next hour and just sit back and relax and be present as we kind of connect with one another and talk about this opportunity to find ways for our students to make connections. So this session is really about finding ways for students to connect with one another, connect with us as educators, and then of course, connect with a wider community. So we're gonna look for ways for students to be able to have an authentic audience for their work and talk about why we think that's important. So what we're hoping you'll do is be able to think about some of the learning experiences that you design for your students and look for ways that you can include more opportunities for connection. And we'll talk about digital tools as well as we look for different strategies. So what we know is that collaborating and interacting socially is so important to learning. I think about when I get a new idea, if I read an article or, watch a video or someone shares a new idea with me, one of the first things I want to do is talk to someone else about it. And I think our students are the same way, right? It's neat when we can give them the opportunity to kind of verbally process, to think through ideas by talking about them, by collaborating and having that kind of social interaction. So that's kind of what our focus is today. We know that it's so important for students to be able to collaborate. We know that this is a lifelong skill, and we want them to feel connected. We want them to feel connected to us as educators. We want them to feel connected to one another. It's also really important for them to understand that diverse viewpoints exist, and not only that they exist, but they're important, and that they actually widen our perspective and help us grow and learn. So we want them solving problems together and talking with one another. And so that's kind of, one of our main goals today as we think about this. And a couple of ways that we can do that is not only, creating an authentic audience, possibly giving students that opportunity to be able to create work and share ideas outside the classroom. But also we want them to make an emotional connection to the content. So I always think about the time when my daughter got to present at an academic fair. She was young, it was like upper, like 5th grade or so, upper middle or upper elementary. But she had family and friends come to watch her presentation. And she can still tell you about that presentation. She can still tell you about the ideas and the content of what she presented because she made that emotional connection. She got to wear her big brother's shirt because she was dressed up like Ronald Reagan, and she got to wear her papa's tie. And that emotional connection provided a connection to the content. And so it can be a really awesome thing when kids make that kind of connection. And then just another quick, anecdote. When I was at my school, we created an online newspaper. And it was so interesting to me. I had 7th and 8th graders who were the reporters and the editors of this newspaper. And it was so interesting to me how, as our audience grew and it became real, so as parents or their friends or even people from outside our school started to tune in each week to the different articles that they were writing, the conversations that I was overhearing were really interesting to me. Things like, hey, will you look at my article and make sure it sounds okay? Because all of a sudden they were creating something not just for me, not just for, the check mark in my grade book, but there was an audience beyond the walls of our classroom, and that took it to a new level for them. So, the point of all of this is that when kids can make connections with us as educators, have conversations and reflect on content, when they can connect with one another to solve problems and to work out misconceptions and have those conversations, and then when they can connect with that wider audience, their opportunities for deeper learning are really augmented. And so what we want to look for are opportunities for us as educators to do this. So how can we do this, right? Well, we want to look for opportunities for them to talk. When you talk the entire time, which is easy to do, we've got so much to share with our kids, and you go home exhausted, then that tells you that you spent too much of the time talking, and we want to give them an opportunity to collaborate and to verbally process and to think and talk more with one another and with each other and with us also. So we want to try to work to create that environment. So weaving that in as many places as possible throughout our lesson plans and throughout the fabric of our days. And then of course, how can we provide opportunities for kids to connect outside of our classroom walls? So that's just a little bit of like an introduction to what we're thinking about today. As we look at, what our kids are doing in this same kind of environment, we're hoping, and what we want to see from them is that they're engaged in collaborative inquiry. We want them discussing and maybe even debating viewpoints and really looking at things from all different perspectives. We also want an opportunity for students to learn from one another. So if there's a student in your class who really understands a certain concept and can share his or her learning with another student, that kind of mentor-mentee relationship can really increase opportunities for pride, for, feelings of acceptance with different kids. So looking for ways for them to be able to do that can be huge. Okay. So we want them to connect with one another and outside the classroom. So, thinking about technology, how can technology do this? Well, you guys, we know that technology is so amazing these days. It's 2021, and think about what we can do. The connection can happen across classrooms. So if you're a social studies teacher, you could connect with an English language arts classroom within your school, or maybe across town within your district, or across miles, across the country, maybe even around the world. And things like Flipgrid, for example. So Flipgrid is a tool that allows students to create a video response to a prompt, right? So as the teacher, I can say, hey, we just had this current event happen, or we just read this novel, or hey, you just learned this new math strategy. Can you reflect and can you share your understanding with one another by creating a video? And you guys, Flipgrid has a really cool aspect to it called Grid Pals. And Grid Pals is like a pen pal, but for 2021. So it's an opportunity for kids to connect. Classrooms can connect over miles, and they can work together and collaborate and share ideas via Flipgrid. So that'd be one way. We also know that, Microsoft Word or Google Docs or Slides or PowerPoint, these can be used also as collaborative tools. So what if students were able to share, something that they create in that environment with someone far away, or even just other kids in their class? So I think the idea is that we want students creating, and we want them sharing their ideas, and then we want to look for ways to provide that wider audience for them. Okay, so that's kind of, like I said, just a little bit of an overview of what we're going to do today. And so one of the first activities that we're going to do is to actually dive in and read an article. Okay, and then we're going to give you about 5 minutes to do this, and then we'll come back together and encourage you either in the chat or even verbally, if someone feels comfortable sharing verbally, to share your ideas, okay, and something that resonated with you, something that you kind of took away. So Sherry is sharing right now in the chat the link to the article. If you'll do me a favor and click on that, what we'll do is go ahead and read it, and then we'll come back together in 5 minutes or so, and we'll talk about what resonated with you, what made sense for your environment, maybe a question you have. Healthy skepticism is always welcome as well. So is there someone that would like to kind of repeat back to me right now, just to verbalize and make sure that I was clear in my directions about what we're going to do for about the next 5 or 6 minutes? Who would like to do that? Otherwise, I may just call on someone. Yes, Steve, you're right. We are going to read the article, and then when we come back together, we'll share our ideas, something that resonated with us. So thanks, Steve. I appreciate you jumping in and putting that in the chat. That's perfect. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and look at the time, and let's see. We're at 12:12 my time. We'll come back together at about 12:17. And I'll go ahead and just mute so that you can read this, at your leisure quietly. And then I'll look forward to hearing your take on the article.
I think that one thing that's missing is the strategy. That is how to have engagement online. And right now, there's a real stress. For example, I'm at the ISTE conference, which is the Institute of Using Technology in Education. And there's a real emphasis on paid products. And so we're embedding already a win-lose situation. And I wish that there was more of an emphasis on creating frameworks or perhaps templates within free LMS systems, and maybe not Google Classroom, because who knows how that's going to evolve over time, sure, but that gives teachers, especially pre-service teachers, the tools and a structure to understand how to use activities online to increase engagement.
Yeah. Yeah, because there's lots of tools, but if you don't have the strategies and the knowledge about utilizing those tools in an effective way, then, you know, they're just tools. So I think, yeah, you make a really good point, Catherine. Anyone else have something to respond to either Carmen or to Catherine? Or I'm looking at the chat too, and there's a lot of wonderful ideas being shared here.
This is Steve. I was just going to point out that, you know, when I read, you know, the work of Dewey and all the talk about authenticity, which was very difficult in the traditional classroom, you know, back in the day, but now with technology, we have those opportunities to have those authentic learning experiences. And as the other lady, I didn't get her name, but you know, but having a framework, you know, something to help teachers along the way would be extremely helpful. So.
Absolutely. One of the things that we're going to look at in just a little while is looking at a lesson redesign. And we have a kind of a set of questions, some, you know, thought process kind of things for you. And we actually have a PDF file that we'll share. And it, if you download it and open it on your computer, it's editable, so you can type within it if you'd like to. And I think it'll provide some structure and some food for thought as you kind of think about how you could take something that you're doing currently and maybe augment it and create some of those opportunities for students. Anyone else have a thought you'd like to share? I'm just kind of reading through the chat. I thought one of the interesting things that someone had written, Amy says, you don't need to know everything to be a successful teacher in the 21st century classroom. You just need to know how to facilitate. And Amy, I think that's such a great point. That was one of the things that kind of spoke to me as well when I read that article. I think it's hard to facilitate, you know, I mean, we are used to, for years, teachers were, you know, the disseminators of the information. And now we really have so many opportunities for kids to figure stuff out on their own, to teach one another, to find the answers themselves. And we know that when they do, when they're working in that kind of constructive and collaborative way, a lot of times the stuff sticks with them more so than you know, when they're just listening to the teacher explain. So anyone else would like a chance to share your thought?
I think also that, and this is being addressed and has been talked about by different educators, but I think that even in LA, you have Wi-Fi deserts, right? So we have this conversation, and I think that we're chasing something, you know, we're chasing effects of a badly designed system. That is, you know, I'm currently now working with the 501c3 in Cambodia to bring over different educational things here. And Wi-Fi is $8 a month, right? In China, I worked in China for 3 years. It was $10 a month. And I think that this is not a school district problem, and it's not a state problem. It's really a national problem. And it's about, I think, changing how funding is provided for Wi-Fi. I mean, as they roll out the 5G network, why not give free access to all the schools? In the same way with C-SPAN, when they implemented this, they said, okay, all of the C-SPAN channels are free, right? So I think that, you know, we're all trying to find funding locally and support these schools, but that means that we will have, for the next 100 years or however many years we follow this strategy, this inequity built into a system which makes each individual school district responsible for this resource allocation. Yeah. And I just, you know, from your platform, which is a national platform, I think that this is something that we can't solve. You know, as a teacher, I can't solve this. As a school, I can't solve this. And so but these are the conversations we're having at ISTE and at NSTA, and it's something that we can't solve. And so I just think that conversation perhaps needs to change. I just thought I'd mention it to you because you're a national.
Yeah. Well, and I appreciate you bringing it up. And I think that the last year of our lives, or the last 15 months of our lives, has really, you know, shone a spotlight on that inequity. And I think you bring up a really good point, and it's an important one. So I appreciate you sharing your ideas and your thoughts, because you're not wrong. It's definitely, something that we need to continue to work on. And like you said, it's not something that, an individual teacher or an individual school district can solve. It's something that we all have to do together. So I think that kind of brings us back to our point about teaching our students, like the future leaders, the future people who will be doing this in 20 years, to work together, to solve problems and look for ways to be able to, find our way through. So I appreciate so much, Catherine, you sharing your thoughts, and all of you for sharing your thoughts in the chat and verbally, if you chose to. So what I'm going to encourage you to do now is think about taking just one lesson. So we know we've got big world issues, and she's not wrong. But what we'll do now is just make it a little bit smaller. We'll kind of narrow our scope a little bit and go back into our classrooms and think about how we can take a learning experience that we've designed for our students and tweak it some and redesign it with these ideas in mind. So the questions that I want you to ask yourself are things like, are we focused on the product, what our kids are producing, or are we focused on the process, right? I think there's a place for both, but a lot of times we can get really focused on that end result, whereas think about everything that's amazing that happens along the way. And what kinds of opportunities for flexibility are we building in? I remember as a student teacher, my faculty advisor saying, if you're nothing else as a teacher, you have to be flexible. So thinking about that. And then, of course, we want to look at our standards in our curriculum, and we want to say, hey, what are we expecting to, what's going to be the end result here? What does success look like? So we want to look at that. And then, of course, we want to look for ways that our kids can collaborate more with one another. They can make those connections with each other and with the content. And then, of course, that idea of connecting outside the walls of the school, because there are so many diverse viewpoints and different people out there in the world, and we want them to be able to connect in order to have that authentic audience and also look at things from a different viewpoint. So what we're going to do is kind of give you an opportunity to think that through. And as you do these lesson look fors, are you seeing your kids connecting with one another? Are they planning and sharing together? Do you hear them solving problems? Do you see them teaching one another? Is that something that you as the teacher are going to guide, or are you going to just hope that it happens naturally? I remember as a teacher starting to create videos for my classroom, and they were everything from how to do things, skill-based videos, to stuff about procedures and policies. And I had a student say to me, could I create some of those also? And so what I started having them do is all of them creating videos for next year's class, teaching little parts of lessons. And I started to create a repository. And it was a really neat way for students to be able to teach one another. And I'll tell you, you have to really know your stuff in order to be able to teach it, right? We know that. So these are the kind of look fors that we're going to look for. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to give you a chunk of time, okay, where you can just kind of ponder this, reflect, think about a lesson that you do, or a learning experience that you've got for your students, and maybe look for ways to kind of redesign it, thinking about some of the ideas that folks have shared today, as well as the ideas that I've shared. And we're going to take about 15 minutes. I'll actually set the timer, and I'll just mute, giving you time to be able to work independently. And then we'll come back and hopefully get another opportunity for this wonderful sharing that's been taking place so far in our session today. So what I'm going to do is Sherry has put a link in to a PDF file, okay? And I'm going to encourage you to click on it, and open it up. If you download it to your computer and then reopen it, you'll be able to type inside of it if you'd like. So if you want to do that, great. If you'd rather jot on paper and just leave it there on your screen, that's great too. You'll have 15 minutes to just kind of look through and think this through. Who would like to reiterate that which I just shared in terms of what we're going to do for about the next 15 minutes?
Clear as kind, definitely. What I got from it is that we're just going to go ahead and click the link in the chat, open up this design, the experience PDF file. We're going to explore it for 15 minutes. We're going to consider the questions and ideas in it. And that way we'll be able to come back to discuss, put in the chat what we learned from this. And then optional, if you want to type inside of it, you can just download it to your computer and then you'll be able to type inside of it.
Thank you, Sherry. I appreciate it so much. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and mute everyone. I'm going to turn on the timer and we'll look forward to you sharing your experience in just a little while.
Of how would I coach a teacher into doing this? But
sure,
as atomic structure is usually one of the first major lessons in 8th grade science, I took that entire unit, and for my learning outcomes, I'll just read what I have. The students will be able to correctly identify the first 18 atoms of the periodic table, given just basic information. And so my backstory for the students would be that the first 18 elements spontaneously fell off the periodic table and they shattered into thousands of tiny pieces. Some pieces are numbers, some are letters, still others are pieces of symbols and images. So they're not going to have just, one block if that makes it too easy.
okay.
The students' goal is to use what they learned to reassemble the first 18 elements on the periodic table.
Awesome.
The evidence is that they'll create a digital portfolio that includes the links that they use to learn the information, as well as documents used to facilitate their learning. They're going to work in groups of 3 to identify them. They're going to use the CER, the claim evidence reasoning writing technique, as they work to assemble it. The collaborative piece is that the teacher will create a back channel to be used with other classes in which students will be encouraged to not only ask, but also answer questions about different elements. The stipulation is that the teacher will monitor the questions, and that's to prevent the, hey, is this one hydrogen? And yes or no question, right? So they can only be, it's almost like the guess who game.
Yeah, yeah.
The person wearing, glasses. They have to be those types of questions. And then the resources is the only thing that I would give them is a blank periodic table and maybe a list of like 5 websites that they can use to start with, because then they can take those websites and there's always other links that they can go to.
Sure.
So given that their grade would be based on each person's claim evidence and reasoning, because you can't just assemble it. You have to be able to tell me why each of the 18 elements is where it is specifically.
Gotcha. That is so cool. I think that's just such a neat, engaging way to get them just problem solving and to take something that, they need to know, but you found a really collaborative and fun way to do it. I absolutely love it. And I so appreciate, you're sharing your ideas there, Ms. Moore. That was fantastic. I love also that you've got the idea of the back channel where students are able to collaborate across classes, but you've been very specific about your objectives and the parameters of that. So there are specific rules and regulations and that kind of thing that they have to follow, which is good, because I think, collaboration, we know it's so important, but it's not necessarily something that comes naturally. There are specific strategies that have to be taught, and kids have to be given that specific guidance. And here's what you're going to do to collaborate. Here's how you're able to work together, and this is what's okay. So that was That was super fantastic.
Yeah, I really like the back channel with them being able to collaborate with students outside of in other classes. It's like those walls come down with the technology. So that was really cool.
Yeah. And kids, I mean, kids love that. Kids are, you know, our middle schoolers especially are so social just naturally. So that's perfect. I'm seeing just a couple messages in the chat. Does anyone else want to share verbally, or go ahead and type in the chat something that you did in your redesign?
Well, one thing I've done, I'm not in the classroom anymore, but I was getting more and more frustrated with assessment results, traditional assessments. And I was a language arts teacher. And one thing that I did as I began to understand constructivism and collaboration, instead of having a traditional assessment, I had the students make a game, like sort of like a game of life. And as they go through, and they had to deal with character and theme and things that were in this particular work. And I had the students design the game, and they had to actually, you know, put what happens to people as they go through, and it had to be related to, of course, the story. And then once they created it, and this was a collaborative experience, then they had to have another group play their game. And so they were able to get that feedback from them, and it was a continual learning experience, and they were continually reflecting back on the text instead of me having them regurgitate, you know, multiple choice tests. And so I found that to be a very rewarding experience for me as an educator, as well as my students, who seem to really enjoy it. So
I would, if I were a student in your class, that would be right up my alley. I think just the idea that you're offering something different, you know, something different from the traditional assessment, like you said, is so powerful. We know that not everyone is a good test taker, and that our tests do so many of our students a disservice. They're not able to truly show what they know about something. So that's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's awesome. Very, very cool. I think we have time for one more person to share if you'd like, and then we do want to kind of finish up. And I'm seeing the chats come in. Yeah, the game of life thing is so cool. That's awesome. Thanks for sharing, Angela. It's neat to see that you do that also. Kids like anything that's different, right? Absolutely. Think about our students who are, you know, strong writers, and that's great, or strong test takers, and that's wonderful. But so many of them have so much that they do understand, and so much that's inside them that they're thinking and feeling that they, you know, would benefit from sharing. But they are better at doing it verbally. They're better at doing it in a different way, in a creative way. So, yeah, thank you guys so much for sharing those ideas. I think what I'm going to do now is just kind of give us a whole group share out prompt. Okay, so before you came in today, something that you were thinking that maybe your thinking has changed slightly. So if you can take this thinking routine and kind of think about it for a minute, and then share in the chat. I used to think, but now I think. So maybe a new idea that that you were able to get from today would be great. Go ahead and type that into the chat. I used to think, but now I think. So just something, some new idea that you got, or some way that your thinking has changed slightly throughout our time today. Yeah, Amy, I agree with you. Kids collaborating across classrooms, you know, can be a really neat way for them to make connections, and that's awesome. I agree, absolutely. I used to think I wasn't creative enough to design lessons or units, but now I think it's not hard if you put the work back on the students and less on me. Yeah, let them help you, right? Ask them how they would like to demonstrate their understanding of things. You know, getting kids to share, you know, share in different ways, offering them that voice and choice can be can be really powerful. And it's interesting too, just to see what they end up saying. So that's great, you guys. Thank you so much for sharing that. Go ahead and keep those I used to think, but now I think kind of statements coming as I just kind of finish up some logistic stuff here. So we have a survey for you to complete. It's in order to get feedback for us about these sessions in order to make them better. And then also for your attendance today. So Sherry just kindly put that into the chat. And if you can go ahead and click on that link to that JOT form, that will give you your attendance as well as give you an opportunity to give us feedback. So thank you so much for doing that. And then let me just tell you that we've got about 6 more of these coming up throughout July. So in a couple of weeks, we've got designing for collaboration. So there won't be one next week due to the 4th of July holiday, but there's designing for collaboration is July 13th. And then designing learning for metacognitive reflection is later in July, empowering students to use video and audio, adapting SEL for multicultural contexts, an awesome one about creating rubrics for mastery and choice. So if you went to the one on assessment last week, that's a wonderful follow-up to that. And then finally, evaluating your text tools for student-centered use. So looking for ways to not just use a tool for the sake of using a tool, but really making sure that it's meeting the needs of your students. So we hope that you will join us at those. And again, giving the feedback in the form today will help make these even better. So thank you so much for taking the time to do that. We are about a minute away from being done. So, oops, I didn't mean to click on that link. Sorry about that. So thank you once again for joining us today. We're so happy that you're here and incredibly impressed that you'll take some time out of your summer. After a crazy year, thank you for being, dedicated educators who are here trying to get new ideas and learn some new things. I'm so glad that you joined us today. I'm really happy. Thank you also just for your service to your students and to your community. I appreciate it. And thanks for the chats that are continuing to come in. Sherry, thank you so much for helping me today. Rita, thank you for your constant help with all of my emails. I appreciate it so much, you guys.